Welcome to another episode of my Anthology Series where I talk about problems I don't have the answer to in perpetuity. This should be part number 4. Da-na-na. One thing I think about a lot is the fact that there are so many things that require so much effort, far beyond what most people think of when presented with the idea, right? It's honestly a wonderful thought experiment to unravel these ideas in real time. For example, why can't we end world hunger? Couldn't Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos just fund it? The answer? Absolutely not. Let's deep dive this. So, the UN World Food Program says that 363 million people are at risk of acute hunger in 2026. That is a lot of people. It also says that 45 million people are at risk of acute hunger just because of the conflict in the Middle East. Also, 70% of people at risk of acute hunger live in a fragile or conflict affected country. Pause right there. 70% of the people at risk of acute hunger live in a war zone, basically. So I think we're all aware of the fact that there isn't really any amount of money that you can hand over to just stop a conflict outright, which means that there are alternative routes we have to take as a result, right? So we have to negotiate humanitarian access to these regions. We have to ask for food to pass through. We have to ask for doctors and other first responders to pass through. And it goes without saying that that's not easy at all. Also, the entire time that you're in that region, your life is at risk. In simple terms, you have to beg terrorists to allow food drives, and that's kind of sad. And you can enforce embargoes on trade on that region to stop them from receiving goods as a result of their actions. And this is in hopes that they'll either give up from, lack of funding, lack of goods, or lean back at least a little bit, right? Also, on the end, there is military action as an option, but you don't want to take that route because oftentimes it's not great, but oftentimes it is the only choice. But why would another country's military invade a region and risk their soldiers, equipment, funds, and remove attention on other objectives that might actually affect them if there isn't a direct risk to their country's interests? Think about that. And then, even if you do invade, you could just make things worse. So, it's honestly tough, man. Now, outside of that, in places that are experiencing food insecurity that aren't affected by war, there are still a lot of issues, right? For example, the Middle East conflict, once again, being that the world is currently fighting over access to the Strait of Hormuz, we cannot reliably say that we'll be able to transport food at the speed we once did. Obviously, that raises prices. This inflates the price of food, among other things, which obviously isn't great. And there's also the fact that when traveling to a lot of countries outside of the US and even super rural places like South Carolina, no hate to South Carolina, but y'all are super country. A lot of places actually don't have roads. When I traveled through Latin America as a young boy, I experienced long stretches of either like plains or tropical environments where there were like dirt roads or actually no roads at all. That doesn't pair well with trying to ship supplies as well as people all around the world. This would mean that you not only have to invest in the food and supplies you're trying to take there, you would also need to invest in vehicles that are suited for that terrain, roads, and build them yourself, air transportation, or sea transportation, all of which add an increasing level of complexity to the question of why can't we just deliver this food? Also, I guess this is a bit easier, but you also got to bring some guys with you that speak Spanish. And Spanish speakers are relatively easy to find, but multiply that with the difficulty of languages that are more scarce, where there's only, a couple thousand speakers or even like 100,000 speakers. That's still pretty tough. Whew. And this final point is one that may be the hardest of them all. You eventually have to empower the people experiencing hunger to be entirely self sufficient. You can't send aid forever because that means they'll never develop agriculture, markets, farming, innovations, or anything like that. But you also can't not deliver aid because the loss of life would be far too great. So, some kind of way you have to empower their governments and other organizations to sustain life in that region. Obviously, it's easier said than done. So, I guess my point is that there is a lot that charitable donations can do because development work is incredibly underfunded for how important it is. But at the same time, outside of buying things like equipment and resources, which are important, mind you, there are things that donations just cannot do. And it's kind of up to us as a society to creatively solve these problems that don't have an answer that is like a simple dollar amount. So, once again, I don't have the answer to this question. I just thought it was interesting how it, sort of breaks down and appears much, much, much more complicated than it is on its head. But I guess you guys can figure it out. Good luck, chat.